On a rainy morning in London, a street girl finds a mysterious basket in Hyde Park. Upon lifting the elegant blanket, she discovers 3 abandoned and hungry twin babies. While their desperate father moves heaven and earth to find them, dangerous forces try to erase any trace of the children. What begins as an act of compassion turns Rachel into the only hope for a family, and the target of a conspiracy that could cost her life. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. Let's continue. I promise, this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. On a cold, rainy morning in central London, Rachel Oliver, a 9-year-old girl with large, expressive eyes, walked the grey streets trying to sell wilted daisies to survive. Her worn sandals barely protected her feet from the wet asphalt, while her torn sweater let in the icy July wind. Her tanned skin was marked by life on the streets, but her eyes still shone with a strength that defied her reality. Hyde Park, normally bustling with families on weekends, was almost empty that Monday morning. Rachel entered through the gates, seeking shelter from the rain under one of the awnings. That's when she noticed something unusual in a secluded flower bed, an elegant basket, covered by an expensive-looking blanket. It seemed so out of place that Rachel hesitated before approaching. Did someone forget it? She murmured to herself, looking around to see if anyone was watching. Moved by curiosity and the intuition that life on the streets had taught her, Rachel cautiously approached the basket. The blanket was navy blue, with delicate embroidery on the edges, certainly something she could never own. With trembling fingers, she lifted a corner of the soft fabric. "Oh my goodness!" she exclaimed, taking a step back. 3 tiny, identical faces stared back at her with the most intense blue eyes she had ever seen. Babies. 3 twin babies, all dressed in Egyptian cotton clothes and the most expensive brand of nappies on the market. Despite their material comfort, their little faces showed discomfort. They were hungry, alone, abandoned. One of them began to cry, a weak, frightened wail that broke Rachel's heart. She, who had never cared for babies before, felt something awaken within her, a protective instinct she didn't know she possessed. "Shh, little one," she whispered, crouching down to the height of the basket. "Who would do this to you?" Rachel looked around again. No one in sight. The rain had intensified, and she knew she couldn't leave the babies there exposed to the cold and dampness. Even if someone had left them there on purpose, it wasn't safe. She herself knew all too well the dangers that lurked on the city streets. With a surprising determination for someone so young, Rachel picked up the basket and covered it again with the blanket, protecting the babies from the rain. The weight was considerable for her thin arms, but the adrenaline gave her strength. "Let's get out of here," she told the babies, as if they could understand her. "I'll take care of you until we figure out what to do." Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, in the Kensington borough, Gus Aldrich woke up in his 500-square-meter penthouse with a terrible headache. The 32-year-old businessman, owner of one of the largest private hospital networks in the UK, hadn't slept properly for 2 days. His eyes, red from crying, fixed on the photo next to the bed, him holding his 3 newborn sons. "Peter, Philip, Matthew," he whispered, touching the photograph with his fingertips. The doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of Ronald, his driver and trusted man. "Any news?" Gus asked as soon as he opened the door, his voice hoarse with despair. Ronald shook his head, avoiding eye contact with his boss. "Nothing yet, sir. The teams are searching the entire city. Inspector Carson said he would personally deliver a report on the investigation by noon." Gus nodded mechanically. Since the disappearance of his triplet sons, exactly 48 hours ago, his life had turned into a nightmare. The nanny, Carmen, had vanished the same day. The condominium's security cameras had been mysteriously turned off. There were no clues, no ransom demand. "Increase the reward to £10 million, Gus ordered. "And double the number of private investigators. I want my sons back no matter what it costs." Rachel, meanwhile, walked quickly through the streets of Chinatown, the heavy basket in her arms. Some passers-by looked at her with curiosity, but no one dared to interfere. In London, people learned to mind their own business without getting involved in others' problems. The girl headed to the only place she knew as home, an abandoned warehouse behind an old textile factory. The space was small and damp, but at least it was protected from the rain. She had improvised a mattress with cardboard boxes and blankets found in the rubbish, and kept her few possessions in a battered backpack. Carefully placing the basket on the makeshift mattress, Rachel examined the babies more closely. All were boys, and they seemed to be only a few months old. They were clean and well cared for, which made their abandonment even more mysterious. "You must be hungry," she murmured, worried. "But what do babies eat?" Her experience with children was limited to observing mothers in the park and squares. She knew that small babies drank milk, but didn't know what kind to buy. With the £23 she had saved, all her worldly possessions, she went in search of help. At Mr. Anthony's small grocery store, 2 blocks away, Rachel found the courage to ask, "Mr. Anthony, what do small babies eat? The really young ones?" The middle-aged shopkeeper looked with curiosity at the girl who frequently bought bread and milk from his store. "They drink special milk, infant formula." "Why, someone you know had a baby." Rachel swallowed hard, feeling her palms sweat. "It's for my cousin. She had a baby and needs to know what to buy." Mr. Anthony didn't seem convinced, but pointed to a shelf where there were tins of baby formula powder. "These are the best, but they're expensive. You have to prepare them properly following the instructions and use filtered or boiled water." The price of the smallest tin made Rachel's heart sink. £45. More than all the money she possessed. "Thank you, Mr. Anthony. I'll tell her." Returning to the warehouse, Rachel found the 3 babies now crying in unison. The sound broke her heart into 1,000 pieces. Determined not to fail those little beings that fate had placed in her path, she pulled all her savings from her jacket's torn pocket. "I'll have to find more money," she told herself. "But first, let's give you names." Looking at the first baby, who had a small birthmark on his forehead, she decided, "You'll be Peter." The baby seemed to calm at the sound of her voice. "You with those chubby cheeks will be Philip." The second baby sobbed softly. "And you, little one, will be Matthew." The third baby grasped her finger with surprising strength. "I promise I'll take care of you," Rachel whispered, a tear tracing a path down her face. "I don't know how, but I'll find a way." In the Kensington penthouse, Gus was on a video conference with Inspector Carson. "Mr. Aldrich, we have a lead. A witness saw Carmen getting into a taxi on Sunday morning, carrying a large basket. We are tracking all taxis in the area at that time." "And my sons? Did anyone see my sons?" Gus's voice was heavy with despair. "Not yet, sir. But we are following all leads. The taxi driver said he dropped Carmen off at Hyde Park. Our teams are currently searching the area." Gus hung up the call and looked out the panoramic window, watching the city that seemed to swallow his sons. The rain continued to fall, as if the sky was weeping with him. Rachel knew she couldn't stay long in the abandoned warehouse with the babies. The place was cold, damp, and completely unsuitable for such young children. With the baby still crying from hunger, she made a decision. She picked up the wilted daisies she had tried to sell earlier and hurried out. "I'll be back soon. I promise," she whispered to the little ones, covering them carefully with the blanket. Chinatown Square was busy, despite the rain which was now falling more lightly. Rachel positioned herself strategically at the exit of the underground station, offering her flowers with a determination she had never felt before. "Flowers, miss." "Flowers for your love." Her childish voice had gained an urgency that touched the hearts of passers-by. In 2 hours, she had sold all the daisies, raising £68, more than she managed on normal days. At the chemist's, she bought the cheapest tin of milk she could find, 3 simple baby bottles and mineral water. At the mini-market, she acquired the most economical brand of disposable nappies. She spent almost all the money, but knew it was just the beginning of many expenses to come. Back at the warehouse, Rachel found a grey-haired lady standing outside, curiously looking at the half-open door. It was Mrs. Zelda, a resident of a nearby tenement building who sometimes gave food scraps to Rachel. "What are you hiding in there, girl?" she asked in a firm but not hostile voice. "I heard a baby crying from that place." Rachel's blood ran cold. She didn't want anyone to know about the triplets, at least not yet. But she needed help. "Mrs. Zelda, she hesitated, her eyes welling up. "I found them abandoned in the park. I couldn't leave them there." The lady's expression softened, and she gestured for Rachel to open the door. Inside, the babies continued to cry, now weaker, exhausted by hunger. "Oh my goodness," exclaimed Mrs. Zelda, approaching the basket. "They're triplets. So tiny. I bought milk for them," Rachel showed the bags, "but I don't know how to prepare it properly." Mrs. Zelda took the purchases and shook her head. "Come with me." "You can't stay here." Rachel hesitated. "Where to?" "To my house, girl. It's not much, but it's clean and warm. These babies need care." With a mixture of relief and apprehension, Rachel followed the lady, carrying the basket with the 3 little ones. The tenement building where Mrs. Zelda lived was 2 blocks from the warehouse. It was a set of small rooms that shared a communal bathroom, but the lady's space was impeccably clean, with floral curtains at the windows and a small altar with images of Catholic saints in a corner. "My youngest daughter is already a mother," Mrs. Zelda explained, as she prepared the baby bottles following the tin's instructions. "I know how to care for babies, but these are so small. They must be 3 months old at most." Rachel watched every movement of the lady attentively, learning how to warm the milk to the right temperature, how to test it on her wrist before offering it to the babies, how to hold them correctly to feed them. "They're beautiful," Mrs. Zelda commented, as Rachel fed Peter. "But what do you intend to do with them? Have you thought about taking them to the family court?" A shiver ran down Rachel's spine. At 9 years old, she already had her experiences with the child protection system, none of them positive. After her mother disappeared 2 years ago, she went through 2 shelters before running away and choosing the streets. "No," she replied firmly. "They would be separated, and they could go to bad places." Mrs. Zelda sighed, understanding the dilemma. "Girl, you're a child yourself. How are you going to care for 3 babies?" "I don't know yet. But I promised them I wouldn't abandon them." The determination in the girl's eyes touched the lady's heart. "You can stay here for a few days until we decide what to do. But if they appear on the news, if someone is looking for them, we have to notify the authorities." Rachel agreed, reluctantly. As the babies slept after being fed, she turned on Mrs. Zelda's small television, flipping through the local news channels. Her heart almost stopped when she saw a photograph of 3 identical babies on the afternoon news. Triplets, Peter. Philip and Matthew Aldrich, sons of businessman Gus Aldrich, were kidnapped from their Kensington residence 2 days ago. The baby's nanny, Carmen Duarte, is also missing and is the prime suspect. A reward of £10 million is being offered for information leading to the children's whereabouts. "It's them," Rachel whispered, looking at the sleeping babies. "I even gave them the same name." Mrs. Zelda made the sign of the cross. "Holy Mary, we need to take these babies back to their father." Rachel felt a knot in her throat. Part of her wanted to do the right thing, return the babies to their family, but something didn't make sense. Why would the nanny leave them in the park? Why didn't she ask for a ransom? Maybe she regretted it, Mrs. Zelda suggested, or got scared by the repercussion of the case. "I need to think," Rachel murmured. "If I take them back now, they'll think I was the one who kidnapped them." The situation became even more complicated when the newspaper showed Carmen Duarte's photo. She was a young woman, approximately 30 years old, with brown hair and serious features. According to the report, she had worked for the Aldrich family for only a month. "Something's wrong," Rachel insisted. Why would she abandon the babies after kidnapping them? And without asking for money? Mrs. Zelda had no answer for that. That night, as the babies slept in a makeshift bed made of drawers lined with blankets, Rachel couldn't close her eyes. She knew she was involved in something much bigger than she could comprehend. The babies were the children of a powerful man who would certainly move heaven and earth to find them. How would she explain that she found them abandoned in the park? Who would believe her? But there was another, even greater concern. What if the babies hadn't been abandoned by the nanny? What if there was someone else behind all this? Someone who wanted to get rid of them for good? The thought sent shivers down Rachel's spine. "I need to find out more," she decided. The next morning, after helping Mrs. Zelda feed and change the babies, Rachel left with the excuse of buying more nappies. In reality, she headed to an internet cafe in the center of Chinatown, where she spent £2 to access the internet for 20 minutes. She typed Gus Aldrich's name into the search engine and found dozens of articles about the businessman. He owned a hospital network called Health Group, was 32 years old, and was a widower. His wife, Caroline Aldrich, had died during the triplets' birth 5 months ago. The babies were premature but survived thanks to the intensive care at their own father's hospital. So they're 5 months old, Rachel murmured to herself. Continuing her research, she discovered that Health Group was in the process of merging with another large hospital network, Medicare UK, belonging to the Middleton family. The deal, estimated at billions of pounds, would be concluded in the coming weeks. The internet usage time ran out before Rachel could deepen her research, but she already had enough information to fuel her suspicions. Returning to the tenement building, she found Mrs. Zelda cradling one of the babies while the other two slept. "This one is Philip," the lady smiled. "I recognize him by his way of frowning when he's almost asleep. Peter has that little mark, and Matthew is the smallest." Rachel smiled, surprised that they could already differentiate the triplets. "Mrs. Zelda, do you think I should call the reward number? Tell them I found the babies?" The lady thought for a moment. "I think so, girl. But we have to be careful. We don't know who is behind this kidnapping, and they might blame you. I'll call myself, without saying where we are. First, I want to know more about this Gus Aldrich." At that very moment in the Kensington penthouse office, Gus received an unexpected visit. Richard Middleton, CEO of Medicare UK and future partner, appeared unannounced, with a grave expression on his face. "Gus, I came personally to offer my support in this difficult time. I've already put our private security team at your disposal to help in the search for your sons." "Thank you." "Richard," Gus replied mechanically, his eyes fixed on a photograph of the triplets. "I also came to talk about our merger," Richard continued. "Investors are nervous about this whole situation. I suggest we postpone the contract signing until everything is resolved." Gus stared at the visitor intensely. "The merger will happen as planned. I will find my sons and nothing will disrupt the business." Richard smiled slightly. Of course. It was just a suggestion." "Well, I must go. Keep me informed about the search." When Richard left, Gus remained motionless for a few minutes. Something about his future partner's visit deeply bothered him, but he couldn't define what. Perhaps it was just the stress of the situation, or perhaps... The rain lashed London that night, turning the streets into small rivers and making life even more difficult for its inhabitants. In the Peckham tenement building, Rachel helped Mrs. Zelda change Matthew's nappies, while the other two babies played with improvised rattles made from plastic bottles and rice grains. "We need more milk," the lady commented, counting the last portions of the almost empty tin, "and more nappies. These little ones consume everything very quickly." Rachel looked worriedly at the remaining money. They had spent almost everything on basic supplies in the last 2 days. Even with Mrs. Zelda contributing her modest pension, resources were quickly running out. "I'll go out to sell flowers early tomorrow," Rachel said, determined. "Maybe I can get enough for another tin of milk." Mrs. Zelda watched the girl with admiration. Rachel, so young and already with so much responsibility on her shoulders, showed impressive maturity. The lady had tried to persuade her to seek the authorities, but the girl was adamant. She claimed she needed to better understand what had happened before returning the babies. "Rachel, we can't keep them forever," Mrs. Zelda argued for the umpteenth time. "Their father must be suffering terribly." "I know," the girl replied, stroking Philip's little head. "But there's something strange about this whole story. Why would the nanny leave the babies in the park after kidnapping them? Why didn't she ask for ransom? And that man who visited Mr. Gus yesterday, that Richard, he seemed very interested in postponing the company's merger." Mrs. Zelda frowned. "How do you know that?" Rachel blushed. "I went back to the internet cafe this afternoon. There's a business gossip blog that posted about the visit, and I found out more about the merger. If Mr. Gus dies without heirs, his shares automatically pass to the minority partners. Who are this Richards family?" The lady's eyes widened, impressed both by the girl's perceptiveness and the gravity of the implications. "Do you think they wanted to get rid of the babies? The heirs?" Rachel nodded slowly. "What if the nanny discovered something and tried to save them? What if she's not the kidnapper, but was trying to protect them?" The two remained silent for a few minutes, watching the triplets who now slept peacefully, oblivious to the suspicions hanging over their fate. "We need proof," Mrs. Zelda concluded finally. "We can't make such accusations against powerful people without concrete evidence." "I'll try to find out more," Rachel said, determined. "And in the meantime, We'll take care of them. In the Kensington penthouse, Gus received Inspector Carson's daily report on the investigations. After 4 days with no concrete news, despair began to be replaced by a cold, calculated anger. "We found the taxi that transported Carmen to Hyde Park," the inspector informed, showing security camera images. She was carrying a large basket, as the witness had mentioned. The driver confirms that she seemed nervous, constantly checking the rearview mirror as if fearing she was being followed. "And then, what happened to her and my sons?" Gus asked, trying to maintain his composure. The inspector hesitated before continuing. "Park cameras show Carmen leaving the basket in an isolated flower bed and then running towards the north exit. After that, she disappears. We couldn't track her on any other cameras in the area. She abandoned my sons in the park." Gus's voice rose, incredulous. "What do you mean, why?" "We don't know for sure. The most probable hypothesis is that she met someone in the park to whom she would hand over the children, but something went wrong. Or perhaps she regretted it and decided to leave them where they could be found quickly." "And where are my sons now?" The question hung in the air like a heavy storm cloud. "The park cameras have blind spots, unfortunately. We see the basket being left, but we can't see who picked it up later. We are interrogating all regular park-goers and checking cameras on adjacent streets." Gus stood up abruptly, unable to contain his frustration. 4 days. 4 days without my sons, without knowing if they're well, if they're being fed correctly. His voice choked. "They are premature babies, Inspector. They need special care, specific formula. We are doing everything possible. Mr. Aldrich, we have expanded the search to the entire metropolitan area and increased the reward's publicity." When the inspector left, Gus remained motionless, staring at the city through the panoramic window. The rain seemed to reflect his state of mind, stormy, oppressive. On an impulse, he picked up the phone and dialed a number he rarely used. "Marcus? It's me, Gus. I need your help." "No, it's not about the hospital. It's about my sons. I need you to use your contacts." "Yes, those contacts. I want to know everything about Richard Middleton and his family. Everything." Back at the tenement building, Rachel attentively read a printed report that Mrs. Zelda had brought from work. The lady was a cleaner in a commercial building and used to pick up newspapers that executives discarded. "Look here," Rachel pointed to a small paragraph almost at the end of the article about the kidnapping. "It says Carmen Duarte was recommended for the job by a recruitment company specializing in nannies for high-end families. But before that, she worked as a nurse at Medicare UK. Richard's company."
"Exactly."
Rachel felt a shiver. "And there's more. According to a colleague, Carmen suddenly resigned after witnessing a suspicious conversation between company executives. No one knows exactly what she heard." Mrs. Zelda pondered the information. "It's still very little to make such a serious accusation, Rachel. We need more. I know." The girl looked at the babies, who were now more active and alert after days of regular feeding and proper care. "But I can't just hand them over without being sure they'll be safe." A noise at the door interrupted the conversation. It was Mr. Arthur, Mrs. Zelda's neighbor, a 70-year-old man who lived alone. "Zelda, there are some strange men hanging around the block," he warned in a low voice. "They're showing photos of the babies from the newspapers and asking if anyone saw anything." Rachel and Mrs. Zelda exchanged alarmed glances. "They must be from the police," the lady suggested. "They don't look like police," Mr. Arthur retorted, scratching his bald head. "They didn't show identification, and they're in a black car, one of those expensive ones. One of them even offered money to anyone who gave information." Rachel's heart pounded. "It's them," she whispered. "We have to get out of here." "Calm down, girl," Mrs. Zelda tried to soothe the girl. "We don't know who they are." "Exactly. We can't risk it." After thanking Mr. Arthur for the warning, who left without asking more questions, in the tenement building, people learned not to meddle too much in others' affairs, Rachel and Mrs. Zelda began to prepare a hurried escape. "Where are we going?" the lady asked as she packed nappies and milk into a bag. Rachel thought quickly. "I know a place. It's in Peckham, not far from here. It's the house of a lady who sometimes gives me used clothes. Her granddaughter moved abroad and the room is empty." Mrs. Irene, the lady mentioned by Rachel, was a 75-year-old widow who lived in a modest but cozy house in the Peckham neighborhood. When Rachel appeared at her door with Mrs. Zelda and 3 babies, The surprise was great, but the compassion was greater. "Oh my goodness, what happened?" she asked, opening the door for them to quickly enter. In a few words, Rachel explained the situation, or at least a simplified version of it. She said she had found the babies abandoned, and that now strange people seemed to be after them. "They're the babies from the news, aren't they?" Mrs. Irene asked, recognizing the triplets. "The children of that rich businessman." Rachel nodded nervously. "I want to return them to their father, Mrs. Irene, but I need to be sure they'll be safe. Something very strange is happening." The elderly woman observed the triplets for a moment, then looked at the two unexpected visitors. Finally, she sighed deeply. "My son is a solicitor," she revealed. "Not one of those famous ones, but he's honest and competent. I'll call him. Maybe he can help us better understand this situation and make contact with the children's father safely." While Mrs. Irene prepared tea in the kitchen, Rachel looked out the window and saw the same black car mentioned by Mr. Arthur, slowly passing down the street. "They're following us," she whispered, feeling a chill down her spine. The fear intensified when, a few hours later, the evening news brought alarming information. The body of Carmen Duarte, the Aldrich triplets' nanny, had been found in a vacant lot in East London. Police are investigating whether the death is related to the kidnapping of businessman Gus Aldrich's children, missing for 4 days. The main hypothesis is that Carmen was a victim of her own accomplices in the crime. Rachel and Mrs. Zelda exchanged horrified glances. The situation had just become much more dangerous. Solicitor Claude Barton, Mrs. Irene's son, arrived at his mother's house early the next morning. He was a middle-aged man, with grey hair at his temples and a keen gaze behind his thin-rimmed glasses. Upon seeing the triplets sleeping in the room that had belonged to his niece, he was visibly impacted. "Mother, do you have any idea what's happening here?" he asked in a low voice, after being introduced to Rachel and Mrs. Zelda. "These are the Aldrich babies. The whole country is looking for them. That's why I called you," Mrs. Irene replied firmly. "We need legal guidance to return them safely." Claude looked at Rachel, who stared back at him with a mixture of distrust and hope. "Girl, you need to tell me exactly how you found these children," he said, sitting at the kitchen table. "Every detail can be important." Rachel took a deep breath and meticulously recounted the encounter in Hyde Park. She described the elegant basket, the expensive blanket, the healthy appearance of the babies, in stark contrast to the state of abandonment in which they were left. She also shared her suspicions about the relationship between the kidnapping and the business merger. Carmen wasn't the kidnapper, Rachel concluded. She was trying to save the babies from something worse. And now she's... "We can't jump to conclusions," Claude interrupted, although his worried expression revealed that the girl's suspicions didn't seem entirely absurd to him. "What we need to do now is ensure your safety and the safety of these children." "How will we do that?" Mrs. Zelda asked, serving coffee to everyone. "First, I need to verify some information," the solicitor replied, taking his laptop from his briefcase. "We'll research more about this merger and about the nanny." Over the next few hours, Claude navigated legal websites, news portals, and publicly available online documents. What he discovered only intensified the suspicions. The merger between Health Group and Medicare UK would create the largest private health conglomerate in Latin America, he explained. "But there's an interesting clause in the preliminary contract. If Gus Aldrich cannot assume the presidency of the new group for any reason, control would pass entirely to the Middleton family. And without his children, who would inherit his shares?" Rachel asked, who was following the explanations closely. "Exactly what you suspected. In the absence of direct heirs, the shares would be divided among the minority partners, with the largest portion going to the Middleton family." "That still doesn't prove anything," Mrs. Zelda pondered. "It could be a coincidence." "True," Claude agreed, "but there's more. Carmen Duarte really worked as a nurse at Medicare UK for 5 years. She left there 2 months ago, resigning suddenly. And according to her social media profile, she had studied with Gus's deceased wife at nursing college. This information surprised everyone." "She knew the baby's mother?" Rachel asked, feeling the puzzle pieces fitting together. "It seems so. And there's more. I found a newspaper article from 3 years ago about an anonymous complaint of overbilling in drug purchases at Medicare UK. The complaint was filed due to lack of evidence, but it caused temporary discomfort between the companies. Do you think Carmen could have been the whistleblower? Mrs. Irene suggested, who was following the conversation attentively. It's possible. And what if she discovered something about the current merger, something that could harm the triplets? The cry of one of the babies interrupted the conversation. It was Philip waking up hungry. Soon Peter and Matthew also woke up, demanding attention. While Rachel and Mrs. Zelda cared for the little ones, Claude continued his research. When they returned to the kitchen, he had an even graver expression. Richard Middleton has a brother, Julian. He doesn't appear in the company's official records, but he's in several photos of social events. And I discovered something disturbing. He has a history of lawsuits for corporate fraud and violence, all resolved with out-of-court settlements. The man in the black car, Rachel murmured, feeling a chill. Describe him, Claude asked, opening a page with photos. Rachel detailed the man she had seen observing the tenement building and then driving past Mrs. Irene's house. Tall, broad-shouldered, well-cut hair, a discreet scar on his chin. It's him, Claude confirmed, showing a photo on the screen. Julian Middleton. A heavy silence fell over the kitchen, broken only by the sound of Philip playing with a spoon. We need a plan, Mrs. Irene finally said. We can't just take the babies back to their father. If our suspicions are correct, Richard's men could intercept them beforehand. What if we talk directly to Gus? Rachel suggested. Explain everything to him. Claude shook his head. Too risky. We don't know who is watching his house, who has access to his phone. We need a reliable intermediary. The inspector handling the case, Mrs. Zelda ventured, also risky. We don't know if anyone in the police has been bought off. Claude thought for a moment. I have a colleague who works with the family court judge. Maybe we can arrange a judicially supervised handover, with total secrecy until the right moment. As they discussed the plan's details, they didn't notice a car discreetly parking on the other side of the street. Inside, Julian Middleton observed the house with binoculars. I found the children, he said on the phone, and it seems we have a bigger problem than we expected. There's a solicitor with them. At the Kensington mansion, Gus received the information he had requested from his contact, Marcus. Richard Middleton has enormous debts, Marcus, a former police officer who now worked as a private investigator, reported. Gambling, failed investments, extravagances. Medicare UK is practically bankrupt, disguising the deficit with accounting maneuvers. The merger with your company is their only salvation. And his brother, Julian? Gus asked, whose intuition told him there was more behind his son's kidnapping than met the eye. A dangerous character. He manages the family's side businesses. He has connections with all sorts of people, from corrupt politicians to... Marcus hesitated. To what? Gus pressed. To people who solve problems definitively, if you understand me. Gus felt his blood run cold. You think they want to eliminate my sons? Marcus didn't answer directly, but his silence was eloquent. With you out of the way, or at least without heirs, they would assume full control after the merger, he finally explained. And their company would be saved by your money. Carmen must have discovered something, Gus concluded, connecting the dots. She worked at Medicare UK before coming here. Caroline, my wife, knew her from college. It's a possibility, Marcus agreed, and it would explain why she took the babies from home, but didn't ask for ransom. She was trying to protect them, and paid with her life for it. Gus clenched his fists, feeling a cold rage spread through his body. I need to find my sons before they do, and then I will destroy Richard Middleton. I have a team searching throughout the city, Marcus assured. If your sons are in London, we will find them. At Mrs. Irene's house, the plan was almost ready. Claude had contacted his colleague in the judiciary, who agreed to organize a discreet meeting at the central courthouse, where Gus could safely receive his sons, with the presence of trustworthy authorities. Early tomorrow, the solicitor announced, Judge Sampson will receive Gus Aldrich in his chambers without revealing the reason. Only when he is there will we arrive with the babies through a secondary entrance. And how will we get there without being followed? Rachel asked, worried. My friend Paul is an ambulance driver, Mrs. Irene said. He can take us as if it were a medical emergency. Good idea, Claude approved. No one would stop an ambulance. The plan seemed perfect, but Rachel still felt a tightness in her chest. She looked at the triplets, now playing on the living room rug, and thought about how attached she had become to them in the last few days. Peter with his easy smile, Philip with his insatiable curiosity, Matthew with his quiet way of observing everything. "They'll be fine," Mrs. Zelda said, noticing the girl's expression. "Their father seems like a good man. He'll protect them." "I know," Rachel replied, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I'm just happy we managed to keep them safe." As they talked, they didn't notice that Julian was now on the phone with Richard. "I'm going into the house tonight," he was saying. "The old woman lives alone, and there are only 2 women and 1 man inside besides the children." "We can't draw attention," Richard replied, tense. "Wait until you're sure they're the Aldrich babies." "I'm already sure. I saw one of them through the window. They're identical. And I heard part of the conversation. They're planning to hand the children over to Gus tomorrow at the Central Courthouse." A heavy silence followed on the other end of the line. "We cannot allow that," Richard finally said. "If Gus gets his sons back and discovers our involvement in all this, we're finished. He has enough influence to destroy us." "What do you want me to do?" Julian asked, already knowing the answer. "Use your contacts. I don't want details, just sort it out tonight." Inside the house, oblivious to the approaching threat, Rachel helped Mrs. Irene prepare dinner, while Claude finalized the arrangements for the next day. Mrs. Zelda bathed the babies, singing lullabies her grandmother had taught her. Night fell over London, bringing a false sense of tranquility. In the streets, the lights began to come on, and movement gradually decreased. It was the calm before the storm that none of them could foresee. The night advanced slowly in the Peckham neighborhood. Around 10 o'clock, Mrs. Irene, Rachel, Mrs. Zelda, and the babies were already settled in the 2 back rooms of the house, while Claude prepared to leave. He had decided to return to his flat and come back very early the next morning to accompany them to the Central Courthouse. "Are you sure you don't want to stay?" Mrs. Irene asked, worried. "There's space on the living room sofa. I need to pick up some documents at home and speak personally with my contact in the judiciary," Claude explained. "I'll be back before 7. The hearing with the judge is scheduled for 9, and Gus Aldrich will be called for 8:30. Rachel watched the conversation from the bedroom door, uneasy. Something didn't feel right, a sense of danger she couldn't explain. "Mr. Barton," she called timidly, What if someone is watching the house?" The solicitor hesitated for a moment. The girl's concern was not unfounded, especially after confirming that Julian Middleton was involved in the case. "I'll take a walk around the block before leaving," he decided. "If I notice anything suspicious, we'll go to Plan B. We'll call the federal police directly." Claude picked up his briefcase and left through the front door, promising to return in a few minutes if everything was normal. Rachel ran to the bedroom window, discreetly pulling back the curtain to observe the street. The neighborhood was silent, with few people walking on the pavements. Some cars were parked, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The girl was about to turn away when she noticed a subtle movement. The interior light of a black car, parked on the corner, briefly lit up when someone opened the door. Her heart pounded as she recognized Julian Middleton's profile getting out of the vehicle, followed by 2 other men. They conversed quickly, then separated, walking in different directions but all approaching Mrs. Irene's house. "They're here," Rachel shouted, running to the living room. "The men from the black car. There are 3 of them. They're surrounding the house." Mrs. Irene and Mrs. Zelda exchanged alarmed glances. "Claude just left," the elderly woman said, worried. "He might run into them." As if in response to her concern, they heard a noise on the side of the house, the sound of breaking glass. Someone was trying to enter through the kitchen window. "Quick, grab the babies," Mrs. Irene whispered, maintaining surprising calm for someone her age. "Let's use the passage." "What passage?" Rachel asked, confused. "Come." Mrs. Irene led them to a small cupboard in the hallway, connecting the living room to the bedrooms. Removing some boxes from the back, she revealed an almost invisible small door. "My husband built this passage during the dictatorship," she explained quickly. "He was a journalist and sometimes needed to hide people persecuted by the regime. It leads to the backyard of the next-door house, which belongs to my friend Joanna." As she spoke, the sound of heavy footsteps invading the house through the kitchen could be heard. There was no time to lose. Mrs. Zelda had already picked up Peter and Philip, while Rachel held Matthew. Mrs. Irene opened the small door, revealing a low, narrow tunnel. "Go," she ordered. "I'll follow. And don't make any noise." "Aren't you coming, madam?" Rachel asked, alarmed. "I'll distract them first," the elderly woman replied with determination. "I've known Joanna for 50 years. Tell her I sent you and she'll help." Before they could protest, Mrs. Irene pushed them into the tunnel and closed the small door. Then she picked up the mobile. Phone Claude had left on the table and quickly typed a message to her son. "Invaders in the house. We are using the passage to Joanna's. Call trustworthy authorities." She put the phone in her pocket and calmly walked to the living room, where she found Julian and another man ransacking the place. "Who are you and what are you doing in my house?" she asked in a firm voice, feigning surprise. Julian turned, clearly annoyed at having been discovered. "Where are the children, old woman?" he asked sharply. "What children?" "I live alone," Mrs. Irene replied, crossing her arms over her chest. "And if you don't leave right now, I'll scream until I wake up the whole neighborhood." Meanwhile, Rachel, Mrs. Zelda, and the triplets advanced through the narrow tunnel. It was difficult to move carrying the babies, but fear gave them extraordinary strength. Surprisingly, the little ones remained silent, as if understanding the gravity of the situation. "Almost there," Mrs. Zelda whispered, seeing a faint light ahead. Upon reaching the end of the tunnel, they found another small door, which led to a small tool shed in the backyard of the next-door house. They opened it carefully and emerged one by one into the fresh night air. Mrs. Joanna's backyard was well kept, with potted plants and a small vegetable garden. The kitchen lights were on, indicating that the resident was still awake. Rachel went ahead and gently knocked on the back door. A white-haired black lady answered, her eyes widening at the sight of 2 women and 3 babies in her backyard. "Mrs. Irene sent us," Rachel quickly explained. "We're in danger. Men invaded her house." "Oh my goodness," exclaimed Mrs. Joanna, opening the door completely. Come in, come in." Once inside the cozy kitchen, Rachel briefly explained the situation. Mrs. Joanna, who had lived long enough not to be easily surprised, listened attentively. "Irene stayed there?" she asked, worried. "Yes, she said she would distract them," Mrs. Zelda replied, cradling Philip, who was starting to get restless. "That woman was always more courageous than sensible," Mrs. Joanna murmured, picking up the phone. "I'm going to call the police." "No!" Rachel interrupted. "We don't know if we can trust the regular police. The men chasing us are powerful. Mrs. Irene's son, Dr. Barton, was going to call trustworthy people." Mrs. Joanna hesitated, but eventually agreed. "And what do we do now?" "We need to get out of here," Mrs. Zelda decided. "They might discover the passage and come after us." "I have a nephew who lives in Camden Town, North London," Mrs. Joanna offered. "He can come pick us up by car. No one would think to look for us there." While waiting for Mrs. Joanna's nephew, Rachel couldn't stop thinking about Mrs. Irene. The brave lady had stayed behind, facing dangerous men to give them time to escape. "We need to warn Gus Aldrich," she said suddenly. "If we can't make it to the meeting at the courthouse tomorrow, he needs to know what we've discovered about the Middletons." "But how?" "We don't have his phone number," Mrs. Zelda reminded her. Rachel thought for a moment. "Maybe we can send a message through the press. An anonymous tip." "Too risky," Mrs. Joanna warned. "If the Middletons intercept—" The conversation was interrupted by a noise at the front door. Everyone froze, fearing the invaders had discovered their hiding place. But it was just Mrs. Joanna's nephew, Edward, a rideshare driver in his 30s. "Aunt, what's going on?" he asked, confused to see so many people in the kitchen, especially 3 identical babies. "No time for detailed explanations, nephew," the elderly woman replied. "These people are in danger and need a safe place to spend the night." Edward, who trusted his aunt's judgment, asked no more questions. "My car is on the corner. We can go now." As they prepared to leave, Mrs. Joanna's phone rang. It was Claude. "Thank goodness," he exclaimed upon hearing they were all well. "I'm with 2 trustworthy federal agents. My mother is safe. The police arrested the invaders, but Julian managed to escape. Don't come back here. I'll send a safe address by message." On the other side of the city, Gus Aldrich received an unexpected call from his private investigator. "Marcus, I have information about your sons," he said, out of breath. "They are alive and well. A street girl found them in the park, and has been caring for them ever since. They are trying to find a safe way to return them to you, but Richard and Julian Middleton discovered their whereabouts and tried to capture them tonight." "Where are they now?" Gus asked, feeling his heart race with a mixture of hope and fear. "They're on the move. A solicitor named Claude Barton is coordinating their protection with the help of federal agents. There was a plan to hand them over to you tomorrow at the courthouse under the supervision of a judge, but now they need a new safe location. Tell them to bring my sons to my aunt's house in Richmond Hills," Gus decided after a moment of reflection. "It's a gated community with private security. I can trust her completely. Are you sure it's safe? The Middletons might be watching your relatives. My Aunt Cecilia uses her maiden name. No one associates her with me, except very close friends, and she has a beach house in Brighton. We can go there later, until this situation with the Middletons is resolved." Meanwhile, Edward's car drove across the city towards North London. In the back seat, Rachel held Matthew, who had fallen asleep in her arms, while Mrs. Zelda cared for the other two babies. The girl looked out the window, observing the lights of the city that never slept. "Everything will be all right," she whispered to little Matthew. "Tomorrow you'll meet your daddy." A solitary tear ran down Rachel's face. In less than a week, she had found and fallen in love with those three helpless beings, had risked everything to protect them. And now she had to prepare to say goodbye. But first, she had one last mission, to ensure that the Aldrich triplets reached their father's arms safely, and that those responsible for putting them in danger paid for what they had done. The dawn in London brought a light drizzle typical of the city. In Edward's flat in Camden Town, Rachel watched the first rays of sun through the window as she cradled Matthew in her arms. The baby had woken up earlier than his brothers, and instead of crying, just stared intently at the girl's face with his big blue eyes. "You're going to meet your father today," Rachel whispered, stroking the baby's fine hair. "He must be a good man. He'll take good care of you all, I'm sure." Mrs. Zelda, who was preparing baby bottles in the small kitchen, noticed the girl's melancholic expression. "Is everything all right, Rachel?" she asked gently. "Yes," she replied, forcing a smile. "I'm just thinking. You'll miss them, won't you?" Rachel nodded, unable to express in words the bond she had formed with the triplets. In less than a week they had become her family, the family she had never had since her mother disappeared. "We can visit, maybe," Mrs. Zelda suggested, although she knew it was unlikely. "Mr. Gus will want to meet the girl who saved his sons." Before Rachel could answer, Edward's phone rang. It was Claude with new instructions. "Change of plans," Edward announced after hanging up. "We're no longer going to the courthouse. The baby's father has arranged a meeting at a safer location." "Where?" Rachel asked, suddenly apprehensive. "At his aunt's house in Richmond Hills. It's a gated community with private security. Dr. Barton and 2 federal agents will meet us there. It seems Gus is also on his way." As they prepared for the trip, the news on television reported the arrest of 2 men who had invaded a residence in Peckham the previous night. There was no mention of Julian Middleton or the connection to the Aldrich triplets case, suggesting that the authorities were being discreet about the matter. "How are we going to get to Richmond Hills without being followed?" Mrs. Zelda asked, worried. "It's a long way from here." "Dr. Barton thought of that," Edward replied. "We're going to switch vehicles on the way. A colleague of mine, also a rideshare driver, will meet us at a shopping centre in Westfield, Stratford City. We'll switch cars inside in the car park, where security cameras can protect us." The plan seemed good, but Rachel still felt an inexplicable discomfort. Something told her that Julian wouldn't give up easily, especially now that his accomplices had been arrested. "We'll be fine," Mrs. Zelda assured her, noticing the girl's uneasiness. "We're almost at the end of this journey." The trip to the shopping centre occurred without incident. Edward drove cautiously, avoiding main routes while Mrs. Zelda kept the babies entertained in the back seat. Rachel remained vigilant, carefully observing every car that came too close or seemed to follow them for a prolonged period. In the covered car park of the shopping centre, they found Paul, Edward's friend, waiting in a discreet grey sedan. The transfer was quick. Bags, babies, and adults moved from one vehicle to another in less than 5 minutes. "Thank you for everything, Edward," Rachel said, hugging the young driver before getting into Paul's car. "It was nothing," he replied with a smile. "Good luck with everything. And take care, brave girl. The new driver, Paul, was a man of few words, which made the trip to Richmond Hills quieter. Rachel took the time to observe the gradually changing scenery. The cramped buildings of Camden Town, giving way to the more spaced-out neighbourhoods of North London, then the motorways and finally the highways leading to the luxury estates in the Surrey region. "It's my first time going to Richmond Hills," Mrs. Zelda commented, trying to ease the tension. "They say it's like a city apart." "I've never been either," Rachel replied, looking out the window at the mansions that began to appear. "Hey, it looks like another world." The estate where Gus's aunt lived was one of the most exclusive in the region. High walls, electric fences, cameras everywhere, and well-trained guards ensured the residents' safety. Paul had to identify himself at the gate and wait for the residents' confirmation before being allowed to enter. "Mrs. Cecilia Noguera is expecting you," the security guard informed after checking the visitor list. "House 27, at the end of Hydrangea Lane." The residence was an elegant two-story building with a meticulously maintained garden and a swimming pool in the back. It seemed straight out of a movie or TV show, nothing like the places Rachel had lived. When the car parked, the front door opened, revealing a lady of approximately 65, with impeccably coiffed grey hair and an upright posture. Cecilia Noguera, Gus Aldrich's aunt, emanated quiet authority. "You must be the angels who found my great-nephews," she said, approaching with a warm smile. Come in, come in. Gus is on his way." Inside the house, they were received with a hospitality that contrasted with the traumatic events of the last few hours. Cecilia had prepared a small breakfast and organized a space in the living room with floor mats and toys for the babies. "My daughter had twins a few years ago," she explained, noticing Rachel's surprised look at the preparations. "I kept everything. You never know when it might be useful. And it seems I was right." Claude arrived 20 minutes later, accompanied by two men who identified themselves as federal agents. They were all visibly relieved to find the babies safe. "My mother sends her regards," the solicitor told Rachel and Mrs. Zelda. "She's fine, just a little shaken by the experience. She's at my sister's house for now." "And the men who invaded the house?" Rachel asked. "They are detained, but they're not talking. As for Julian Middleton, he hasn't been located yet, but teams are looking for him." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of a helicopter flying over the property. Minutes later, they heard the sound of a car abruptly parking at the entrance. "It's him," Cecilia announced, standing up. "Gus has arrived." The man who rushed into the living room looked nothing like the powerful and controlled businessman who appeared in business magazines. Gus Aldrich had stubble, deep dark circles under his eyes, and disheveled hair. His gaze quickly swept the room until he found what he was looking for: three small, identical faces playing on the living room rug. "My sons," he whispered, falling to his knees. What followed was a scene of pure emotion. Gus crawled to where the babies were and carefully hugged them, tears streaming freely down his face. The little ones, as if recognizing their father despite the brief separation, smiled and made happy sounds. Rachel watched the scene with a lump in her throat. This was what she had fought for, to return these babies to their true home, to the father who clearly loved them. But she couldn't deny the pain she felt, realizing that her role in their lives had ended. After a few minutes of emotional reunion, Gus finally stood up and turned his attention to those present in the room. "Who found my sons?" he asked, his voice choked with emotion. Rachel stepped forward timidly. Gus examined her for a moment, clearly surprised to see that his savior was just a child. "You?" he asked softly, approaching. "Was it you who found my sons in the park?" "Yes, sir," Rachel replied, suddenly conscious of her simple, worn clothes in contrast to the luxurious surroundings. They were in a basket, covered with a blue blanket. "I couldn't leave them there alone. What's your name, little heroine?" "Rachel." "Rachel Oliver." Gus knelt again, getting down to the girl's level. "Rachel, there are no words in the world to express my gratitude. You not only found my sons, but you cared for them, protected them, risked your own safety for them." His voice faltered. "How can I repay you?" Before Rachel could answer, the sound of breaking glass echoed through the house, followed by shouts from outside. One of the federal agents ran to the window. "It's Julian," he warned. "He found the location and has armed men surrounding the house." A panic immediately set in. Cecilia ran to lock all the doors, while the second federal agent called for reinforcements on the radio. "How did he find us?" Claude asked, incredulous. "He must have followed the helicopter," Gus deduced, picking up Peter while Rachel and Mrs. Zelda held Philip and Matthew. "We need to get the babies out of here." "The house has a back exit," Cecilia informed. "It leads to the next-door house, which is empty. The owners are traveling." "Just like Mrs. Irene's passage," Rachel murmured, feeling a terrifying déjà vu. The agent, who had been observing from the window, turned to the group with a grave expression. "We don't have much time." "They're approaching." "They seem to be looking for a weak point to invade." "We'll split the group," the other agent decided. "I'll go first with Mrs. Cecilia and Mr. Gus, taking one of the babies. The rest will follow closely behind with the other two. We need to confuse them." "I'm not separating from my sons," Gus protested, holding Peter tighter. "It's the best chance we have," the agent insisted. "If we split up, they'll have to split their forces too. And reinforcements are on the way." Reluctantly, Gus agreed. Peter would go with him, Philip with Mrs. Zelda and the federal agent, and Matthew with Rachel and Claude. Cecilia led the way to the secret exit, a disguised door in the pantry that gave access to a short tunnel under the garden. "What a coincidence," Mrs. Zelda commented as they entered the dark tunnel. "It seems fate wants us to go through secret tunnels. My late husband and Irene's husband were friends," Cecilia briefly explained. "Both lived through the dictatorship. These passages were common among people who needed to protect themselves at that time." The tunnel led to a small shed in the neighbor's garden. The property was silent and dark, with the windows protected by closed blinds. "Now what?" Rachel asked, holding Matthew firmly against her chest. "Where do we go?" "There's a garage with an exit to the side street," Cecilia informed. "If we can get there unseen, we can use the car stored inside. My friend always leaves the key hidden in the sun visor." The plan seemed possible, but it would require perfect timing and a lot of luck. The first group, with Gus, Cecilia, and the federal agent carrying Peter, moved quickly through the dark house, known to Cecilia, who frequently looked after the property when the neighbors traveled. "Wait 2 minutes and follow the same path," the agent instructed before leaving with the first group. Rachel, holding Matthew, who remained surprisingly quiet, counted the seconds mentally. Beside her, Claude seemed tense but determined. "Everything will be all right," he whispered, more to himself than to the others. The silence in the neighbor's house was oppressive. Rachel, with Matthew in her arms, followed Claude through the dark rooms, stepping carefully to avoid making noise. The baby, as if understanding the gravity of the situation, remained quiet, only his big blue eyes moving from side to side. "Almost there," Claude whispered, pointing to a door at the end of the corridor. "The garage is right after that door." Arriving at the garage, they found Gus, Cecilia, and the federal agent already inside a black SUV with Peter safe in his father's lap. The engine was running, but they were waiting for the others before leaving. "Get in quickly," the agent instructed, opening the back door. "We haven't seen any signs of pursuit yet, but we can't risk it." Rachel slid into the back seat with Matthew, followed by Claude. Only Mrs. Zelda, the second federal agent, and Philip, who formed the last group, were missing. The minutes dragged on. The tension inside the vehicle was palpable. "Where are they?" Gus murmured, anxious. In response to his question, they heard a sound of breaking glass inside the house, followed by shouts. Seconds later, Mrs. Zelda emerged, running through the garage door with Philip protected in her arms. The federal agent came right behind her, constantly looking back. "They found us," he shouted, helping Mrs. Zelda into the car. "Let's go, let's go." The driver, the first federal agent, wasted no time. As soon as the doors closed, he accelerated, opening the automatic garage gate with a remote control that Cecilia had provided. "Get down," he ordered as the car pulled out onto the street. It was just in time. Another vehicle, the same black car Rachel had seen before, was slowly passing down the main street of the estate. Inside, Julian Middleton and 2 men were carefully observing each house. "We'll go around the block and exit through the east entrance of the estate," the federal agent at the wheel decided. "It's less used and has fewer security guards, which means fewer people who might have been bought off by the Middletons." The plan seemed good, but it depended on luck and perfect timing. As the SUV snaked through the tree-lined streets of the estate, maintaining a moderate speed to avoid drawing attention, Rachel observed the babies. Peter and Philip were now with Gus, while she still held Matthew. All three seemed extraordinarily calm, considering the chaos around them. "You are very brave," she whispered to them. "Just like your mother." Gus looked at her, surprised. "You know about Caroline?" "Only what I read online," Rachel replied, blushing. "That she was a nurse and studied with Carmen. That she didn't survive childbirth." A shadow of sadness passed over Gus's face. "Yes, Caroline was extraordinary. Strong, determined, compassionate. The boys have a lot of her." "I'm sorry," Rachel said sincerely. The conversation was interrupted when the car made a sharp turn to avoid being seen by Julian's vehicle, which now seemed to be following a systematic search pattern through the estate. "We're almost at the east exit," the agent at the wheel informed. "As soon as we're out, we'll go straight to the federal police station in Richmond Hills. There's a team waiting for us there." But as they approached the east gate, they saw it was blocked by a black car identical to Julian's. "Damn. They thought of everything," the agent murmured. "Plan B. We'll go to the service exit through the back of the estate. It's only used by staff and is near the lake." The new route required crossing a more secluded area of the estate, with fewer houses and more vegetation. The risk of being intercepted increased with each passing minute. "There's another exit," Cecilia suggested. "Through House 42. It's the house of a friend of mine that's on the border of the estate. The back wall leads to a secondary street." "We could jump the wall. With 3 babies?" Mrs. Zelda questioned, worried. "We don't need to jump," Cecilia explained. "Helen installed a discreet door in the wall for when she wants to leave without being seen by the estate security guards. She uses it for morning walks." The plan seemed risky, but it was the best available option. The federal agent made a quick maneuver, redirecting the vehicle to House 42. Meanwhile, Julian received a call from Richard. "Where are the children?" Richard demanded, clearly nervous. "Did you find them?" "Not yet," Julian replied, frustrated. "But they're here on the estate. I have men at every exit. Find them fast. The federal police just issued an arrest warrant for me." Someone is connecting the dots. The call ended abruptly, leaving Julian even more determined to complete his mission. If he was arrested, he wanted to at least ensure that Richard would also fall. And for that, he needed to eliminate any evidence of their involvement in the kidnapping, including the babies. In House 42, the group found Helen, a lady of approximately 70, initially startled by their sudden arrival, but quickly understanding when Cecilia explained the situation in a few words. "Of course, use the door," she agreed immediately, leading them through the house to the back garden. "I've heard about you on the news. So glad the babies are well." The door in the wall was well disguised, covered by climbing plants and painted the same color as the concrete. Outside, a quiet tree-lined street led to a main avenue. "I'll check if it's safe," one of the agents offered, carefully stepping through the door and inspecting the area. When he signaled that everything was fine, they began to cross one by one. First Cecilia, then Mrs. Zelda with Philip, followed by Gus with Peter. Rachel was about to pass with Matthew when they heard the sound of tires screeching inside the estate. "Quick," the federal agent urged. "They're approaching!" Rachel quickly passed through the door, followed by Claude. The 2 federal agents were the last, closing the door behind them and positioning themselves to protect the group. "There's a car waiting for us at the end of the street," the first agent informed. "One of ours." We managed to make contact while we were in the house. A few meters away, a black van with tinted windows waited with its engine running. It was the federal police vehicle, ready to take them to a safe location. But before they could reach it, a car turned the corner at high speed. It was Julian. Somehow he had discovered their escape. "Run!" one of the agents shouted, drawing his weapon. Rachel, with Matthew in her arms, ran as fast as she could towards the van. Beside her, Gus carried Peter, and Mrs. Zelda ran with Philip. Cecilia and Claude followed closely behind. Julian's car stopped abruptly a few meters from the group. He got out of the vehicle, his expression contorted with rage. "Hand over the babies," he demanded, advancing towards them. The federal agents positioned themselves between Julian and the group, weapons drawn. "Federal police." "Stop!" one of them shouted. "You are under arrest, Julian Middleton." But Julian didn't seem intimidated. He continued to advance, his hand moving slowly towards the inside pocket of his jacket. What happened next was so fast that Rachel barely registered it. One of the federal agents fired, hitting Julian's shoulder, who fell to the ground screaming in pain. Simultaneously, federal police cars appeared from both sides of the street surrounding the area. "It's over," one of the agents said, helping Rachel and the others into the van. "You're safe now." Inside the vehicle, as they drove away from the scene, Rachel finally felt the adrenaline subside, replaced by deep exhaustion. Matthew, still in her arms, yawned and closed his eyes, apparently ready for a well-deserved nap after so much commotion. "You were incredible," Gus said, sitting beside her with Peter and Philip. "All of you were. You saved my son's lives." "What's going to happen now?" Rachel asked, suddenly worried about her own future. Without the babies to care for, would she return to her life on the streets? "Now," Gus replied with a tired but genuine smile, "we're going to a safe place until everything is resolved. And then, if you want, I'd very much like to talk about your future." Rachel. 3 months later, life had changed drastically for everyone involved in the Aldrich triplets saga. Richard and Julian Middleton were in prison, awaiting trial for attempted kidnapping, conspiracy, and other crimes. The investigation revealed that they had planned to eliminate the babies to ensure that Gus, in his moment of fragility, would transfer full control of his company to them after the merger. Carmen, the nanny, had discovered the plan by overhearing a conversation between Richard and his brother and decided to protect the babies, taking them away, unfortunately, paying with her own life for her courage. The merger between Health Group and Medicare UK was cancelled, and Gus began a restructuring process for his company, focusing on making it even more transparent and ethical. As for Rachel, the biggest change happened when Gus, after weeks of conversations with social workers and authorities, offered to become her legal guardian. The proposal came after realizing not only the girl's intelligence and courage, but also the special bond she had developed with his sons. "They need an older sister," he explained when he made the invitation. "Someone who has already proven they would do anything to protect them." Thus, Rachel Oliver became part of the Aldrich family, gaining not only a stable home, but also 3 little brothers who adored her. Mrs. Zelda was invited to work as the triplets' official nanny, bringing her experience and affection to the new family dynamic. Mrs. Irene and Mrs. Joanna became frequent visitors, treated as part of the extended family. On a sunny afternoon, 6 months after the dramatic rescue, Rachel played with the triplets in the garden of Gus's new house, a more modest property than the old mansion, but infinitely cozier, located in a quiet South London neighbourhood. "They've grown so much," Gus commented, watching his nearly 1-year-old sons crawling on the lawn. "Yes," Rachel agreed, helping Matthew stand as he tried to take his first steps. "And they're becoming more and more different from each other." It was true. Despite their identical appearance, the triplets' personalities were developing in distinct ways. Peter was the natural leader, always the first to try new things. Philip was the most sociable, smiling at everyone he met. And Matthew, the youngest by a few minutes, was the observer, the thinker, and had a special bond with Rachel from the very first moment. "Thank you," Gus said suddenly, his voice laden with emotion. "Not just for saving them that day in the park, but for everything you've done for them. For being such an incredible sister." Rachel smiled, feeling a happiness she never imagined possible in her previous life. "They saved me too," she replied simply. "They gave me a family." As the sun began to set on the London horizon, casting a golden glow over the garden, Rachel thought about how life could change in an instant. An unexpected encounter, a courageous decision, and suddenly everything transformed. From a homeless girl selling wilted flowers on the streets, she had become part of a family, with a future full of possibilities. Peter, Philip, and Matthew had been her miracle. And she, unknowingly, had been theirs. "Let's go inside," Gus called, picking up Peter and Philip in his arms. "Mrs. Zelda made that lasagna you love." Rachel stood up with Matthew securely nestled on her hip. The baby rested his head on her shoulder, a gesture of absolute trust that made her heart overflow with love. "We're coming," she replied, following Gus towards the house, her home. Finally. Sometimes, Rachel thought, families are not formed by blood but by love, and the love that united that improbable family was stronger than any biological tie could ever be. It was a love forged in adversity, tested in danger, and now flourishing in the peace they had conquered together. And as she closed the door behind her, entering the cozy warmth of the house, where children's laughter echoed through the corridors, Rachel knew with absolute certainty that she had found her place in the world. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope Rachel and the Aldrich triplets story has touched your hearts. To follow more emotional narratives like this, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it here by clicking to the left of the video. If this journey of courage and love moved you, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. We bring unique stories daily that explore the complexities of life and the bonds that unite us. Share your thoughts and emotions in the comments below. We love to know how our stories resonate with you. Until the next emotional adventure.